Well, to discuss the situation in Zimbabwe and particularly from an international law perspective, we're now joined via Skype by Dr. Thompson Chengeta, who's an international law expert and also a fellow at the Institute of International and Comparative Law in Africa. He joins us now live from London. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Good to talk to you again. It's been some time, but a lot of things happening in Zimbabwe in recent weeks. And we just want to get a sense from international law perspective, the things that are playing out there. And I want to ask you directly, have some of the things that have happened, are they prosecutable under international law?
Good evening, Peter. Thank you very much. Without doubt, most of the situations of or things that have been happening in Zimbabwe, particularly, torture, particularly abduction of citizens, are actually prosecutable under international law because some of them do constitute what is termed as crimes against humanity because this has been a systematic, or there have been a systematic violation of human rights in Zimbabwe.
So where do the people of Zimbabwe get recourse in a situation like this?
Generally, in terms of human rights law protection, the first court of call or the primary obligation as far as protection of human rights is concerned rests with the government of Zimbabwe. In other words, they have to find remedies within domestic jurisdiction. It is only upon exhaustion of domestic jurisdiction that they can now be able to appeal to regional and international jurisdictions. And when we're talking about regional jurisdictions, we are referring, for example, to the African Commission for Human and People's Rights. And if we're talking of the international, remedies, we are talking, for example, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, which deals, for example, with complaints on the violations of human rights. However, as you have noted, I have said that for you to be able to go to the regional and international jurisdictions, you have to prove that domestic jurisdictions are not available or are ineffective. And in the case of Zimbabwe, it is clear, Peter, that actually domestic jurisdictions are unavailable and are ineffective. In fact, what we are having in Zimbabwe is a clear situation where you are having a government that is unwilling and unable to give remedies to the current human rights violations that are occurring in Zimbabwe.
All right. So the Zimbabwean authorities say that there is no crisis in Zimbabwe. There are no human rights abuses. And especially saying that actually this is a country at peace. What do you make of that?
Peter, I would want to respond kindly to those vehemence by the government in two folds. The first one being the government position that there is no crisis in Zimbabwe because, for example, they are citing the argument where they say some of the videos that have been relied upon by the people who are using the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter, for example, are old videos from 2018 and 2019, specifically the shooting of civilians by the military on the 1st of August in 2018. Now, with all due respect, that position by the government of saying these are old videos, therefore, it means people who are saying Zimbabweans lives matter are lying, is a gross misdirection. Because to begin with, when you're talking of the violation of human rights and the obligation to provide remedies to victims of violations of human rights, this is a continuing obligation. It only ceases to apply the moment when the government has actually provided remedies to those violations. Now, in the present case, as far as the recommendations that were made, for example, by the Mohlante Commission regarding the violation of the right to life of individuals who were murdered in the streets of Harare, the government of E.D. Mnangagwa has not provided remedies. There has not been prosecution of those who offended or who violated that right. The victims have not been compensated. And now it is a real misdirection and insensitivities on the part of the government to then say people who use those videos to say Zimbabwean lives matter are actually spreading falsehoods. These are not falsehoods. In as much as those rights have not been remedied as yet, it is legitimate, it is correct in law, in terms of international human rights law and the obligations that are binding upon the Zimbabwean government for those videos to be used. If I would allow it.
All right. So what about the idea of peace being prevalent in Zimbabwe?
I think also the idea of peace being prevalent in Zimbabwe is, again, the government of Zimbabwe being insensitive. Because the idea of peace is not only the absence of violence. Of course, there is violence currently in Zimbabwe, but if I were for just a minute to try and say to the government, oh yes, you have provided us with videos which showed that there were, or nothing was happening in the streets of Zimbabwe, the absence of violence itself is not proof of peace. In other words, there's been, in terms of theories of what peace means, that negative peace is not what citizens seek. People seek what is referred to as positive peace, where there is provision, for example, of health care that is working, freedom from persecution, freedom of expression, freedoms which are all provided in the constitution of a particular country. If those rights are not being respected, like in the case of Hopo Chingono, you cannot say that the mere absence of violence or the mere absence of gunshots is proof that there is peace and tranquility in Zimbabwe. It is my hope, Peter, that the envoy, for example, that was sent by President Ramaphosa of South Africa will be able to articulate this nuance, where I'm sure in the history of Zimbabwe, one will be able to write that once upon a time, there was a government of Zimbabwe led by Emerson Mnangagwa, which used the military to silence and make sure that civilians obey the unlawful directives of the government. And after having successfully using the machinations of undemocratic sword to cut the tongues of civilians so that they may not speak against the government then goes up a hill and say, behold, there is peace and tranquility in the country. With all due respect, that is sadistic manner of governing over a very, very sad citizenry. So what I'm trying to say is to say that the fact that at particular moments you may not find soldiers shooting at civilians, that in itself is not proof that there is that there is peace in Zimbabwe or that there is tranquility in Zimbabwe, as it were.
All right, it's an interesting concept that you've raised, negative peace. And if I'm understanding it, it suggests that being disallowed your right to demonstrate, therefore stopping you able to express yourself, does cause a certain amount of quiet, but not necessarily peace, because your rights have been taken away.
Precisely, that is the point. And in that regard, the hope, is that, as I said before, that the envoy that was sent by President Ramaphosa will be able to articulate some of those issues. And at this moment, Peter, allow me even to express my very heartfelt gratitude to the citizens of South Africa that have been expressing their support to the plight of civilians in Zimbabwe, and particularly some of the politicians such as Mmusi Maimane, the likes of Honorable Julius Malema, and really recently the Honorable Lindiwe Zulu, who have made it clear that as far as they are concerned, there is actually a political crisis within Zimbabwe. Though, for example, the minister, the honorable minister, talked about helping ZANU-PF as a sister political party. Our hope is that that sisterhood in political matters will not be greater or will not trump the brotherhood and sisterhood in humanity, or Ubuntu, or the idea that us as people from Southern Africa, we are the same, and that is what we should put first.